Pause for a moment. There are times when an ordinary day quietly becomes the beginning of an extraordinary story. This is one of those moments. If these words have found you today, allow yourself to listen with a calm heart, because what follows is not meant to frighten you or force you toward certainty. It is a fictional story told through the voice of heaven, created to remind you that hope often arrives long before we recognize its footsteps. You have wondered, more than once, whether your existence has ever echoed inside the thoughts of someone you have never truly met. You have asked questions you never spoke aloud. Does anyone feel the strange pull that I cannot explain? Can two lives begin moving toward one another before they even know each other's names? Imagine, for just a moment, that the answer is yes. Imagine that somewhere, without warning, your name was spoken into an unexpected conversation. Not as part of a grand announcement. Not as the center of attention. Only for a passing moment. Yet sometimes the smallest moments become the turning points that reshape entire lives. In this story, your name reached ears that were never expecting to hear it. And silence followed. Not because there were no more words, but because something invisible stirred within a heart that had spent far too long believing it already understood its own future. There are moments even the stars seem to pause to witness. Not because destiny is loud, but because it is astonishingly gentle. It rarely arrives with thunder. More often, it arrives disguised as coincidence, hidden inside conversations that almost never happened, carried by voices that never realized they were delivering the first chapter of something remarkable. The one you know in this story as your soulmate had been moving through ordinary routines. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. Responsibilities filled every hour. Smiles were offered. Conversations happened. Life appeared perfectly normal. Yet beneath every ordinary moment rested a quiet emptiness that even they struggled to understand. Nothing seemed missing. And yet, something always felt incomplete. Not painful enough to name. Not obvious enough to explain. Only a gentle feeling that somewhere, somehow, another piece of the story had not yet arrived. Then came the conversation. It wasn't planned. No dramatic music filled the room. No extraordinary sign appeared in the sky. Someone simply mentioned your name. For reasons that almost seemed insignificant. Perhaps it was connected to a memory. Perhaps it appeared in the middle of another topic. Perhaps it surfaced by pure chance. The room moved on. The conversation continued. Others barely noticed. But one heart did. The moment your name was spoken, something impossible to explain settled quietly over their thoughts. Not confusion. Not obsession. Recognition. A feeling so subtle it almost escaped notice, yet so powerful it refused to disappear. They couldn't explain why your name sounded strangely familiar. They searched their memory. Have we met? Have I heard this before? Why does this feel different? No answer came. Only questions. And sometimes questions are heaven's gentle invitation to begin searching for answers that have not yet revealed themselves. Hours passed. Life continued. Yet every so often your name returned without invitation. It interrupted ordinary thoughts. It appeared between responsibilities. It surfaced during quiet moments when no one else was around. The more they tried to ignore it, the more naturally it returned. Not demanding attention. Simply waiting. Like sunlight resting patiently outside a closed window. They laughed at themselves. "This is strange," they whispered. "Why am I still thinking about someone I don't even know?" No answer arrived. Because some answers cannot be spoken before hearts are ready to receive them. Far above what human eyes can see, this story imagines heaven watching with gentle compassion. Not interfering with every choice. Not removing every obstacle. But witnessing every hope, every fear, every quiet prayer that people believe has disappeared into silence. Nothing sincere is ever truly lost. Every hopeful whisper leaves a mark upon eternity. Every act of kindness becomes part of a greater tapestry. Every season of waiting shapes a soul in ways that cannot immediately be understood. In this imagined story, heaven smiled not because every mystery had already been solved, but because two separate journeys had begun drifting closer than either traveler realized. Neither understood the path. Neither could see the destination. Both continued living ordinary lives. Yet unseen threads had already begun weaving something beautiful. The remarkable thing about hope is that it often grows underground before anyone sees the first flower. Roots spread silently. Strength develops patiently. Nothing appears to be changing. Then one morning everything looks different. Perhaps you have known seasons like that. Perhaps you have wondered whether quiet days mean forgotten dreams. Perhaps you have mistaken silence for absence. But silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is simply preparation. Your imagined soulmate carried your name through the rest of the week without intending to. It appeared unexpectedly. While driving. While reading. While staring through a window as evening painted the sky with fading colors. Every appearance of your name felt strangely peaceful. Not loud. Not dramatic. Only familiar. As though a forgotten melody had begun returning one gentle note at a time. They considered searching. Then stopped. It wouldn't make sense, they thought. There has to be another explanation. Yet the heart often notices what logic cannot measure. There are feelings that refuse to fit inside ordinary definitions. There are moments that quietly remind us life contains mysteries worth respecting, even when they cannot be fully explained. And so they waited. Not intentionally. Simply because they did not know what else to do. Little did they realize that another conversation was already approaching. Another unexpected moment. Another seemingly ordinary encounter. One that would transform curiosity into something impossible to ignore. But that moment had not yet arrived. First, something needed to change within them. Because before two stories can meet, each story must become ready to welcome the other. Growth often happens where no applause is heard. Character forms during unseen days. Compassion deepens through quiet disappointments. Patience becomes stronger during unanswered seasons. This imagined story reminds us that the heart is often being prepared long before it recognizes why. And perhaps that is one of heaven's gentlest mercies. If every chapter were revealed immediately, we would miss the beauty of becoming. If every answer appeared at once, faith would never learn how to breathe. So the days continued. Your name remained. Their questions multiplied. Yet alongside those questions grew an unexpected peace they had not felt in a very long time. It was as though simply wondering about you awakened forgotten hope. Not hope built upon certainty. Hope built upon possibility. Possibility has remarkable power. It opens windows inside hearts that have lived too long behind closed doors. It reminds weary souls that tomorrow is allowed to surprise them. It gently whispers that unfinished stories still possess unwritten chapters. Then, on an evening that appeared completely ordinary, something happened. A familiar face entered the room. No announcement. No warning. Only a quiet smile and a conversation that seemed destined to last only a few minutes. But before the first greeting was finished, your name was spoken again. This time, everything changed. The moment your name was spoken again, the world around them seemed to continue as though nothing unusual had happened. Voices carried on. A gentle breeze drifted past the window. Cups were lifted from tables. Laughter echoed in the distance. To everyone else, it was simply another conversation woven into another ordinary evening. But within one heart, something shifted. Not with fear. Not with confusion. With quiet recognition. It felt as though a door that had remained closed for years had opened just enough to allow a single beam of light inside. They could not explain why hearing your name again stirred such calm, yet they could not dismiss it either. In this fictional story, heaven watched with patient joy. Not because every answer had already arrived, but because hope had begun to awaken where uncertainty once ruled. The smallest moments often become the beginning of the greatest transformations. Seeds do not announce themselves when they are planted. They simply begin growing beneath the surface until the day everyone can finally see what was happening all along. Your imagined soulmate tried to focus on the conversation, yet fragments of your name lingered in their thoughts long after the words had passed. Who are they? Why does this name feel so familiar? Why does my heart become so still whenever I hear it? Questions rose like gentle waves, one after another, each carrying them a little farther from the certainty they once believed they possessed. That night, sleep arrived slowly. The room was peaceful, yet the mind refused to become completely quiet. Every so often your name returned, not loudly, but softly, like the memory of a beautiful melody heard long ago. It carried no pressure, no demand, only a gentle invitation to wonder whether life still held surprises waiting beyond the horizon. Perhaps the greatest miracles in this imagined story were never the dramatic moments at all. Perhaps they were the invisible changes taking place inside two hearts that had never realized they were being prepared for the possibility of meeting one another. Growth rarely announces itself. It often appears through greater kindness. Through unexpected patience. Through learning to forgive. Through discovering peace where there was once restlessness. While your imagined soulmate wrestled with questions they could not answer, you were also changing in ways you could not fully see. Every challenge had been shaping compassion. Every disappointment had been teaching resilience. Every unanswered prayer had been strengthening hope. Even when nothing appeared to be moving, something beautiful was quietly unfolding beneath the surface. This fictional message is a reminder that meaningful journeys are rarely rushed. They unfold one faithful step at a time, often in ways no one notices until they look back and realize every small moment mattered. Days passed. The mystery remained. Yet instead of fading, the feeling became clearer. Your imagined soulmate no longer tried to ignore it. Instead, they smiled whenever your name unexpectedly crossed their mind. Not because they understood. Because something inside them whispered that not every meaningful experience requires immediate explanation. There is wisdom in allowing some questions to remain unanswered for a little while. Wonder has its own purpose. Hope has its own rhythm. And patience often protects blessings before they are fully revealed. One afternoon, they found themselves looking toward the sky without any particular reason. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. The sunlight filtered gently through the trees. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet for reasons beyond explanation, they felt grateful. Grateful for possibilities they could not yet see. Grateful that life still contained mysteries. Grateful that perhaps tomorrow might bring something unexpected. In this imagined story, heaven delights whenever hope begins replacing discouragement. Not because every destination has already been reached, but because hope gives weary hearts the courage to keep walking until they discover what lies beyond the next turn. Sometimes the greatest gift is not immediate arrival. It is renewed expectation. Meanwhile, unseen connections continued forming. Not through magic. Not through force. But through choices. Through moments of kindness. Through becoming the kind of person capable of recognizing genuine goodness when it finally appears. Both paths continued moving forward. Neither traveler knew how close the future had begun drawing them together. Yet every passing day quietly shortened the distance. One conversation led to another. One unexpected encounter gently prepared the next. One ordinary decision unknowingly opened the door to another opportunity waiting just ahead. Nothing felt dramatic. Everything felt natural. That is often how meaningful chapters begin. Not with overwhelming certainty, but with peaceful anticipation. As evening settled once again, your imagined soulmate reached for a notebook resting on a nearby table. Without fully realizing why, they began writing thoughts they had never spoken aloud. They wrote about hope. About timing. About wondering whether life sometimes arranges meetings long before people recognize their significance. Then they paused. Their eyes rested on the final empty line. Almost without thinking, they wrote your name. For a long moment they simply looked at it. No explanation came. Only a quiet smile. Somewhere deep inside, they sensed that this story was not finished. Far from it. It felt as though the first page had only just been turned. And while they could not yet see what awaited beyond the coming days, they carried a growing confidence that every unanswered question was gently leading toward a meaningful answer. What neither of you knew was that another unexpected moment had already begun unfolding. A meeting neither of you planned. A connection formed through circumstances no one could have predicted. The next chapter would not begin with extraordinary fanfare. It would begin with a single decision made by someone who had no idea they were about to change two stories at once. And at the very moment that decision was made, everything quietly started moving toward a future neither heart had dared to imagine.